Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining On the Stage's March webinar. We'll be getting started in just a few minutes as people are still joining the call. We appreciate everyone joining in today. My name is Brett Kashnitz. I'll be introducing the call in just a minute or so as we get all of the participants loaded in so they can participate in today's call. As we go through today's call, just a couple housekeeping. If you have any questions that you would like to submit for Andrew or April, our two guest panelists today, please use the Q&A feature within the Zoom room. This will allow us to prioritize your questions and make sure that we get them answered as quickly as we possibly can and provide you information in regards to your question. We're getting started in just another minute.
April, where are you? Upstate?
Yeah, I'm in central New York, so about 4 hours north of New York City, kind of right in the middle of the state between Syracuse and Utica.
You having a beautiful day like we are? And
yes,
Andrew's always having a beautiful day in LA. So
yeah, it's sunny today. The snow is melting, but we've had a lot of snow in the last 2 weeks. But hopefully that last weekend will have been the last time. I hope, fingers crossed.
On its way.
Yeah.
Is that a Yankees Cup, Tina?
yes,
Wow.
the UCLA Yankees.
Oh, yeah. I was like, all right. You know what? I'll
No.
see you guys later. Bye-bye.
Never. You ready, Brett?
Ready. Awesome. Thank you everyone for joining today. Welcome to the March on the Stage webinar. Our topic today is going to be preparing tech for your next production. My name is Brett Kashnitz. I'm the Vice President of Customer Success with On the Stage. We're excited to bring this discussion to you today and answer some of the questions that were submitted prior to today's call. Some guidelines for everyone on the call today. If you have a question that you would like the panelists to answer, please only use the Q&A feature on today's webinar, not the chat function, so we can identify your questions, make sure we prioritize that. We will be monitoring the Q&A channel for your submissions to the queue and to make sure that the guest speakers can get those. Today's event is sponsored by On the Stage. We're proud to provide a theater empowerment platform for both teachers, educators, and professional organizations. Our goal is to make sure that we help to grow theater, both in providing an easy-to-use platform that is filled with not only ticketing suite, marketing, merchandise, streaming, and fundraising tools, but also our newest resource, which is a program generator, which allows your organization to create both a digital and print program for your organization that allows you to use all the features and information that you've provided for your program site as easy as possible. With that today, I'm happy to introduce Tina Cocomelli, who will serve as today's host for the discussion. Welcome, Tina.
Hi, Brett. You're downstairs today. That's exciting. Brett's in New York City. Really happy to have all of you guys with us. I'm always thrilled to welcome back those of you who join us every time we do this. And especially welcome any of you who are new to the webinars. We know that many of you will be joining us in the recorded version because you're busy teaching or directing or hanging lights or something we just snatched April and Andrew away from doing. So we're just thrilled to have all of you here. If you haven't met me before, my name's Tina, and I consider myself still a lifelong theater educator. And I had the privilege of teaching in the performing arts for 45 years. And then because that wasn't enough, I launched a second career here in New York City with a former student of mine, Hunter Arnold, who is the lead producer for TBD Productions. And you can look us up on the website to see all the great shows that we're involved in. And mostly what I do here at TBD is development. So I'm trying to find the next great thing, reading new scripts and going to readings and that sort of thing. So that's what I do. And I get to partner with OTS on all kinds of great projects for their program. I'm thrilled today to invite a new panelist to join us, April, and I'm going to ask her to introduce herself and tell you a bit about her.
Thank you, Tina. Thanks for having me. It's really exciting to be here. My name is April Sweeney. I'm actually an actor, and that's my first training and my first love, and theater director. And I am also a theater educator. I'm currently on faculty in the theater department at Colgate University, which is located in central New York. I came to the theater as a kid. I found my way into it, and I was very lucky at the time. I grew up in Dallas, and our public school system had some really great arts programs. And so my first exposure was in junior high school and high school. And then I went on to move to New York City and get a BFA in acting from Marymount Manhattan College. And then later decided to study at Columbia University and get an MFA there to work with a couple of really great acting teachers and directors. And I've just been really lucky to be able to work both as an actor and a director in New York, regionally across the US. And sometimes I get to go abroad and make plays in very unusual places and circumstances. And it may seem counterintuitive to be here in a discussion about design, the design process and technical theater, but everything I know and I have learned, or I am still learning about the tech process, actually comes from my experience of being an actor and learning to direct and make my own work. So I hope I can bring that kind of perspective to this conversation as well. And having learned to know what you don't know is actually not a big deal. It's actually one of the best things that you can do, is learn to ask the right questions, create the circumstances and environment for something to happen, and to do your research. And really, if you just can do those three things, then a whole world can open up to you.
Fantastic. We are welcoming back Andrew Villaverde. He was so popular last time he was here, my former colleague, and an ace Ventura of all things lighting, sound. He's also an actor and can do it all, but mostly he's our expert today here on lighting, sound, set design, implementing all that fun stuff that makes directors happy. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, thank you for having me back. I really enjoyed my time last time. I loved April's comment about don't be totally open about what you don't know, because I feel like a lot of times you come to something with a sort of attitude and you're like, oh, I can't let them know what I don't know, and then you sort of miss the opportunity for learning something new. And I love those moments. But I kind of come to this every time I'm starting a new show. I'm thinking about my experience in high school as an actor, and I think I also try to frame everything from thinking of my experience of being in awe and wonder of how this whole thing gets done, and just it's new to some people and it's old to other people, and just trying to make it as amazing as you can. So I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. I went to high school with a very rich theater program. I came to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in Pasadena, California, in 95. I went out of that to working at the Glendale Center Theater. I became the assistant technical director for quite a few years, and then in 2008, I became the technical director for the Performing Arts department at Harvard Westlake School in Los Angeles. And if I had it all over to do again, I think I probably would from high school on really set myself up to be at an educational school and environment. It's very rewarding to see a new group of students come through and find that passion or something that inspires them, or something they find awe-inspiring, and going out and seeing it in the real world, coming back, oh my gosh, I saw that thing you were talking about, it's amazing. And I like that. And then after 10 years at that school, I came to here in Pasadena, or I guess I should say back to Pasadena. Tina was very nice to sort of show me the program over here. I love the building, I love the people. and then she left me here. So we're well, I don't know. How do we get over this, Tina?
That's why I keep urging you back into my world.
I'm really enjoying that. It's the school that my kids go to. So it's a good life here. So I'm happy to talk to anybody about today's program.
Thanks a lot. Great to have you guys here. All kinds of questions popping up in the chat. So I'm going to remind y'all what Brett posted at the beginning. Please put your ongoing questions in Q&A. They're easier for us to manage there. And I also want to just remind everybody that folks on the call come from really differing levels of experience. So please be patient with us and have some grace about the folks who are on day one of having raised their hand at a faculty meeting to save the spring show from being canceled because no one else would do it. And this is a call that Brett had yesterday, like, I don't know anything, I don't know where to start. So we're going to try to nuance our answers to accommodate those of you who know nothing and those of you who are very, very experienced. We just hope that you will hang with us on all of that. I want to start in a really obvious place, and that is the moment of choosing a show. Many of our submitted questions kind of fall under this category. One of our colleagues said, should I consider the tech aspects of a show before selecting one? And of course, this is where all directors, program, creative teams begin. And I'm going to let you launch with that, April, because I'm sure you've been in places where you had lots of resources and no resources. So should we think about what we need before we choose our show?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the vision that you have for what you're making for the play or the musical has to live harmoniously with your budget, right? Because if they don't live together and they don't work together, most likely your project will fail and you won't achieve the goals that you set out, right? Either the aesthetic goals or the learning goals for your students or the experience that you want your students to have or you want the audience to have. So I think that you definitely need to think about where you are. What are your resources? And by that, there are a lot of different types of resources. There are your physical resources that you have, like what you have in front of you, what you own, where you are. There's also your sort of in-kind or donated resources within your community. And then there's your sort of creative community capital, right? Alongside your like actual capital. And the creative community capital can be just as important, as your physical resources, right? That's your students. That's your students, extended, your families, right? That's your school community, right? That's their imagination, their know-how, their labor, and their skills. So I think you really want to know what your resources are and then also know what your limitations are. And as you're considering the piece that you want to make, right? What is your vision? And I think you want to think about pedagogically also, if you're working particularly in a high school or junior high school, for example, and certainly in a college, what's most important to you? Why are you choosing the show in relation to the people you have in the room, to your students, right? What's the story you want to tell? And I would encourage people to think about, even folks who are doing this for the very first time, the design process and the tech process are extensions of the story that you're telling, right? They can't be an afterthought. And in the best possible world, they are just a pillar, or they're two pillars of many, many pillars in the sort of holistic process of creating theater. And so your tech at the end of the day and your design choices, they help to tell the story and to illuminate, not just to produce, and not illuminate and like keep the lights on, but to actually reveal other ways into the story that you're telling, right? So they show us and provide us with another understanding of how the story is being told, right? So that's a reason that you want to think about these things hand in hand. What's the story I'm telling? Why am I telling it? How can I tell it? And, when you understand your limitations and you understand your resources, then you can make really informed decisions about where to put your priorities, right? If you're making a theater for young audiences, which is something I'd never done. And when I started teaching, they were like, hey, here's this class and you're doing a TYA show, go. And I'd never done such a thing. And we had very limited resources. And it made me think, for this story that I'm telling, what's really important. And for my first production, the two most important factors were the costumes, right? To have something really stimulating visually for the kids to respond to, and for the sound design, for the oral world of the play, because that's all we had, because we were moving it from one school gymnasium to another school gymnasium to another school gymnasium, right? So again, don't be afraid. You can't do everything. Choose what you can do well, and choose it because you can do it well, but also because it helps tell the story, and start from there. And I think everything then will kind of unfold if you're asking the right questions in a way that seems hopefully really productive and really successful. So that's what I would say.
Fantastic answer, April. Andrew, anything you'd add on to that?
Yeah, I feel like you kind of hit upon something that I try to think of, like what if we were, I always talk about, you mentioned doing it in a school gymnasium. I always tell the students, like, when we're talking about light design or scenic design, what's the difference between what we're doing here and if we were setting it in a football field in the middle of the day and you had no control of the light, you had no control of the scenery? What's the very basic thing that you need to make this happen? And I feel like that can be freeing. If you think about, if you want to do Titanic and you can't have the ship sink and you can't have the water flood on the stage, maybe you shouldn't, I don't know, maybe you should think about doing that in the future years. But if you do have the ability to kind of, see, do you have set pieces that people are holding that slowly start to tilt, or do you have, I think that, yes, the answer is yes. You do have to take into account your the things that you have in terms of your facilities and your budget, the people that you have. But you might find other workarounds. Tina and I did a production of the Curious Incident. We did that show, and it was a very, you sort of look at it as a very overwhelming tech show, but I think we distilled it down to its most important parts. And the show flew. I mean, it was breathtaking to watch, and the kids really responded to it. And you don't need the technology to tell a story, but you do.
I had seen it in Broadway, so I had not in Broadway. I'd seen it in London, and so my head was like, oh, the floor lit up and the walls lit up, and it was really remarkable. And but the only space Andrew and I had was an empty black box theater that used to be a classroom. And Andrew was really instrumental in convincing me that through lighting and the actors' actual movement, so we made them fly by learning some really great movement exercises we found online. And I think we managed that with 11 little gray wooden boxes in an empty room. And the heart of the story couldn't have been told, I think, any more poignantly than our kids told it. But I think that's another thing, to not see simplicity or a Brechtian response, for those of you who have had all of that theater training, as a loss or as a giving in, but as Andrew said, a freeing of what's really essential here. I loved your football field analogy, Andrew. That was great. What has to happen?
Yeah, I think, Andrew, you're tapping right into sort of like the strongest tool that we have is the imagination, and how you can ignite the imagination, both in the performers and the students you're working with, but also in the audience, right? And I believe almost always less is more, and that is something that the theater actually helps us do in a very different way than like watching a film does, right? So it ignites and asks for the imagination to be ignited in a different way. And the container that you have, or the limitations that you have, can be incredibly, incredibly freeing. And actually, I'm someone who works, if I'm working on devising or making new work with students, one of the first things that I work with them on is something that I learned from Anne Bogart, the American stage director, is like, what are the limitations? What are the rules? I have this set of rules, and I have to make something, and almost always you're going to make something way more interesting than if you just had a blank check. So yeah, I didn't mean to imply that you shouldn't make Titanic. You should figure out how to make Titanic with what you have, right? And what's the best way to tell that story in that space at that time.
So that being said, I'm sure there's a lot of people saying, well, okay, I do have some things, 11 gray wooden boxes and some, I don't know, some clothing that the former director left behind. I might even have some lighting instruments. So what's your recommended approach or some of your favorite tricks for making a show look way better than the money you've actually invested in it? Like, what are the easiest things to buy, rent, use that can elevate a production on a fairly slim budget? Let's assume that very few of our colleagues in theaters, in community theaters and small colleges and high schools and middle schools have endless resources. What are some of your favorite tricks? I'll let you take the lead on this one, Andrew, because I know you got tricks up your sleeve.
I put myself on mute because there's a choir warming up in the next room. So, but I feel like the things that I think of as low-hanging fruit on I'll say sound, or I'm sorry, light design, are if you have a show where you don't pull your grand drape, and you have just some scenic elements, and you have something very dramatic that you can have people walk in on. I feel like if people walk into an auditorium and they see something very compelling looking, like you just have one light with a gobo in it, sort of licking your set from the side, and then maybe some piece of furniture highlighted from another direction. I feel like people are very, they're already very interested, and it's a mystery, right? They don't know what they're going to watch, they don't know what they're going to see, or like, what's that about? The more interest, and then the other one is, if you can do just lights up, lights down for most of the show, but every now and then just pick one moment where you really just isolate a person or a couple of people in an area, so that you're giving people a sense that the space is both large and small. I feel like you can get a lot of that. And also, people talk about the equipment they don't have. There's a lot to be had with lights that don't change color or don't move. Whether the lights, just the difference between 0 and 100, there's a lot of different places to go to from there. And even if the light doesn't change color, it can certainly change, it can change intensities. And then if you're playing with different areas at different intensities, you have a lot to go with there. And also, if you have a series of lights, like all of your top light, all of your side light, front light, your light from the rear, try to give a difference between those, between scenes. I think you'll start to get a sense of what can be done that way. I also think that in the low-hanging fruit category is the use of sound. If you can get a student to find forest background for a scene, or I don't know, just the right piece of music underneath something, you're really sort of, it's cheating, but it's, everybody does it, right? It's just if I'm talking and all of a sudden the theme from Braveheart is underneath me, all of a sudden I've got all the gravitas in the world. It's so I feel like the right music in there, and in terms of scenery, I think that the most bang for your buck, perhaps is I go for a simplicity. If you can't have lots of scenic changes, try to find one element that really encapsulates the entirety of your show. you say, well, what is that? And I don't know what that is, but if you spend some time thinking about it, like the show we were talking about, the Curious Incident, we didn't have the LED panels for the walls and the floor and the ceiling, but we just went with covering the walls in chalkboard drawings of a child's equations all over the walls, and spaceships and that kind of thing. And it put everyone in his world, and they were inside. They were in this world, and then we could light up those panels in different colors. And so it put us in a different place, and it was
Hey,
kind of
Andrew.
an easy way of getting the audience feeling what they were in the world, but it was very
Right.
inexpensive, and it was, and that's not what we were going for, but it ended up being a very easy thing to put the audience in that world.
I feel like the set you've designed for Once Upon a Mattress is the show he's working on now. That's not going to change, is it? It's just going to be there.
No, yes, I wanted to
I wonder
go.
if you have a picture you could hold up, or something you could show people by what you mean about the simplicity of just creating an environment within which all things can happen.
I'm in my office right now. I do have I sent you a text message. I can pull that
You
picture up. I don't
did.
know if I can share it.
Well, let's
But
go on, and while we're digging for that, maybe April has something to add in there.
Well, no, I mean, I totally agree with everything that Andrew said, and just to pick up on, maybe start and go in the reverse direction, but your environment, your set for Curious Incident sounds fantastic, because theater is metaphor in the flesh, right? It's metaphor in time and space. And so, for me, I always kind of start with environments. Like in my mind, I kind of imagine what the environment is, but that is, again, illuminated through the play itself, right? And I think you can find beauty in almost everything. So part of it is saying, what encapsulates or what communicates the metaphor of the play, a central metaphor. It doesn't have to be everything in the play, or a feeling that we want to invoke, right? And if you can kind of start to identify what that might be and brainstorm about that, then when you hit upon an idea, you can kind of then branch out and see, like, well, what do we have, right? Or if you just want to create something, you have the most beautiful chair, and by that I mean it could be, a chair drug out of somebody's basement, but put in the right context, it looks amazing, right? Or it says something about the person who sits in it. So I think that you can make so much from nothing, in a way, and if you really dig into your imagination and how that meets what the play is asking you to consider. Or thinking about simplicity is really, really important. And I love, Andrew, you saying about we only have, our lights don't need to change colors. I was working with a class a few years ago, which was kind of like a workshop for a later production we did of Antigone. And, we were just in a classroom with 4 fluorescent lights, and we brought in 2 boom poles and 2 Lecos, one that had shutters and one that had, like a barn door, or not the barn door, the ones where you could open and close. And that's all we had. And I have to say, that was absolutely enough for us to sculpt the light in the room as we told the stories, right? As the story unfolded. So this idea of not being afraid or missing what you don't have, but really taking what you have and experimenting with it, and exploring and playing and being available to what manifests itself in the room, and also asking your students to do the same. Like, what do they see? Have them put their ideas. I'm very much, whenever I start to work on a play, I sort of set up little mini kind of laboratories or mini sort of workshops. I have what's the one thing we don't know how to do in the play, and we all say what it is, and then we try to do it, right? And we let each student figure out how to do it. So sort of there's like a trial and error. So I think work with what you have, and if you have actual capital, put that to service to the one thing that you think is most important or that you can do well, right? And so maybe it is the sound design, right? So maybe that's having your students be able to record with live musicians or putting them in a recording studio. And also, I think what's really important, particularly in educational theater, foremost, is to tap in to what your students are interested in. So those students who are interested in making music, show them, invite them into the process of creating music, of creating sound, of creating an oral world of a production. They might get really, really jazzed by that and really excited about that. So instead of just dropping beats, they're actually making beats, right, for the play. And it's just another line of telling the story that will hopefully open up something. So I mean, where I work, the best thing about the sort of like liberal arts college where I work is we have this crazy, amazing prop closet. And it's not because someone thought about it. It's because they've had 50 years with not having anybody do anything with it. They just throw a bunch of junk in a room. But the most amazing things are in there. And you got to climb over and find them. But when you do, I could like make pretty much every show I do out of this closet of treasures, right? Because actually objects hold a lot of weight, and when you put them on stage and you can frame them very simply, they say something and they help us tell stories. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I totally agree. Simplicity is the way to start, and don't be afraid to just experiment and to change things.
I think like once every call, we have to remind our colleagues, most of us not being digital natives, that our kids, our students, our young people in our community theaters are our best resource. If they've got an iPhone, they can create music. They can make, feature films. Literally, feature films can be made on a Galaxy or an iPhone or anything like that. So don't be afraid to turn to your kids, as April was just mentioning, and say, how are we going to do this? Did you have something you were going to add, Andrew?
No, it was Brett, I think.
Yeah, just real quick, because I think Andrew and April, you guys both gave really great answers. And I know that we're talking a little bit about this from an educator perspective, but I know both of you have worked in both community and professional as well. Can you share, does that change any of this at all? Does a community or a professional theater, do they owe it to their audiences to do more? This is a question that Aaron had submitted about paying customers, increasing the production values to continue to grow the theater. Is that something that has to be considered of they're paying, so now I need to provide them more?
I want to start because I want to say to Aaron, the shows I go to are on Broadway and off Broadway. And you are very hard pressed these days to find a Broadway show with a gigantic walled set in it and extravagant costumes and all the bells and whistles. They exist, but many of the most popular shows and the things that the patrons are really flocking to fit way more into the category of what we did to Curious Incident than they fit into Moulin Rouge, the extravaganza. That you find a lot of the directors and designers in professional theater these days are much more moved toward a single environment that they create and a much more accessible technology. So I know that doesn't excuse you from the bells and whistles, but go ahead, Andrew, did you have something to?
Well, I mean, I tell my students that, let's say, I mean, this might be sacrilege, but I'm going to take two things that I recently saw in LA. One was, and keep in mind, I've got a young daughter, so we went and saw Frozen, and then like a year later we went and saw Hamilton, and I would say that Hamilton is a great example of it's a really basic set. I mean, it's huge, and I'm sure it cost a lot of money to make, but the idea is it's a single location, and it's just a beams and brick and wall, and that location becomes everything in that world. Of course, there are pieces that move here and there, but it is the location for the whole thing. And even if you take into account the spinning floor, compared to Frozen, that Frozen, it's got projections and huge set pieces and special effects and LED lighting built into the scenery, and the costume quick changes have to go into the scenery, and snow and moving lights and
Disney
all
and
of that.
Disney.
Compared to Hamilton, I feel like Hamilton is so much more. I think it's much more of what I think theater is at its best, which is the storytelling is out there right in front, and then everything else serves that. And if it doesn't need to be a projection screen, then it doesn't need to be a projection screen. I think it's distilled. It's down to
Right.
what's the very basics.
And as an example of that, here's an example of one of your sets that you
Oh
shared
yeah,
with us.
do you have the picture before that, the drawing?
I sure do. Give me 1 second.
So beautiful, Andrew.
Well, the idea was we were going to be outdoors, and so I wanted to have this thing that could come apart into 10 different pieces and just be moved outside and installed every night and then brought back inside at night. And we had to cover a lot of areas, and so I kind of created this. It's a whole set of rectangles and little towers and parapets and battlements, and each one's just a little bit different. And I wanted it to kind of look like it's a small world. And again, simple. There's no. It is very two-dimensional, but it's a whole bunch of two-dimensional objects stacked on top of each other. So there's depth, but it's also not. No one really thinks they're in in an ancient castle. It's just kind of it's a fairy tale fantasy for Once Upon a Mattress.
Can you see the original drawing now?
Yes. Yeah. This
And
is
this
just
has launched us into our next question. So great segue, Brett, because people are still dealing with the challenges of COVID. And that's what Andrew is referring to up until I think yesterday at his school in Pasadena, California. They were still looking at having to do their musical out of doors. And I know the specific question we got was about the approach to production with these COVID challenges, including providing virtual or VOD programs. And for many of you who live in areas where it's possible, this option of being outside. So thanks, Brett, for figuring out how to share that. I mean, it's really like a Lego set that you could move in and out or do anything with. Brett, I'm going to defer to you for the second part of that question. I know Andrew has also done some VOD work, virtual work. I'm guessing April had to as well. But I know in our business, TBD, during the shutdown, we shot a live capture of a Christmas Carol and are continuing to invest in that part of the business as well. So what other suggestions do you have other than something nifty like that you can take down and put back up quickly if you have to move from outside to inside or something?
Yeah, there's a couple aspects that we tend to look at, and I think it depends on what the situation in the local area of what you have to deal with. One of the things is we've seen a great increase in people who are, as you said before, Tina, using their phones to be able to record things, to put together and create VODs of either original content that they can share with their audiences, or of doing really unique kind of ways of capturing the wonderful aspect of what technology is now, especially if you're using Zoom, where you can put a green screen or a background on your Zoom of whatever you upload. You can actually put your performers in a background that matches whatever your show is. So Andrew has some amazing, pictures of his set. We would be able to take that set image and put that behind people in a Zoom room where it looks like they're actually there, and you can record the whole production, even if people have to be physically separated. Sometimes you don't have to go complete physical separation, where you can actually have the cast in one place to be able to record a whole production and offer it as a VOD or video on demand production, or a live stream that happens as the audience is watching from other locations. And I
That
think
sounds really, really hard, Brett. I don't know anything about any of that. How in the world can I do that?
And I think that that's really the best question. It is daunting sometimes to think about all the things that would have to happen in order to do that. And that's where using a partner like either On the Stage, where we use and provide our clients Switcher Studio, which is a very easy to use tool within an iOS or a system that you can actually record, do different shots, and set up multiple cameras through phones or iPads to take your production and put it online. I will tell you there's a lot of DIY, do-it-yourself type of solutions like OBS that are out there to use, but it really comes down to just having a record button. And it's that easy to stream now. I do think that as you continue to go on, and I think April can help to answer part of the second part of the question, when you're taking something from the stage and moving it to a VOD or a digitally recorded solution, there are some things that you want to think about in different ways. Your lighting changes, your costumes may change, and even the way you present it, the staging might change, and that's critical. But the most important thing to think about is that it isn't a huge hurdle. It is setting up a couple phones to record, pressing record, and your students, your community, your professional organizations, there are technologies that are out there on the phones, whether it be Android or iOS, that allow you to splice together your videos in a very professional way that you can download for free, and may take some time, but these are not hard to use technologies. You do not have to have technical skills. This is not, the 1980s when I was learning TV production and you had to figure out how to do wipes. It is super easy to be able to do, and it can all be done on a cell phone. April, did you want to take a little bit to talk about how you took your show that you're currently working on professionally and moving it from a stage production to a video production?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the crux of what you just hit on, Brett, is, whether you are working in sort of old technology, stage technology, or new technology, virtual technology, cameras, things like that. They're both things you have to learn, and they're both things you can learn. And there's a lot of help out there, right? YouTube is amazing, right? Whether you're trying to learn a new lighting board or you're trying to learn how to edit a film, it can be done, and your students can do it, and they can probably do it. I know they can certainly do it better than I can. In a way, they'll learn at least faster than I can. So I would say that, whether you are making a play in a way that is very traditional, or you're trying to make something with new media, the most important thing is to sort of recognize what are you making, and not just who for, but how are you making it. So if you are taking your production of Once Upon a Mattress and you have an embodied live production that you are going to film so that you can stream it or have it on video on demand, obviously you've got to think about, okay, we've got this play and we're going to need to film it. So what you need to think about is, do we have enough? Is the lighting good for the camera? Do we have a great camera, and how are we going to be able to hear it, right? Just the basic fundamentals, and you have to solve those problems. Now, if you're making something for Zoom, right, that's a totally different container. So you need to think about that, right? Am I doing a play? And if I'm doing a play and it's on Zoom, how are we doing that? Is it going to be live? And then how do I manage this little bitty box that I'm in, and the box that Andrew's in, and the box that Brett's in, and the box that Tina's in, and what do we see, right? So when you go into the screen onto the computer, the difference, I think, is that when we're in the theater, our eyes can travel wherever we want them to, and we can feel, right? We can see and we can feel the energy. We're moved by the energy. We can hear, we can make all our own choices. But when you go to the screen on the computer, your eye doesn't get to travel freely. Actually, what you see is what the director wants you to see. So again, it's paying attention to sort of all of those details, right? Or if you're creating, you know, maybe your limitation is that you can't all be together, right? And all you have is, you know, all your kids have phones, right? Then you think about, well, what am I going to make with these phones, right? So choose the material to suit the form and choose the form to suit the material. And as long as you're asking the right questions, I think you'll be able to, you know, and the question is like, how does the form serve the material and how does the material serve the form? You'll be able to engender a roadmap through that. And again, don't be afraid to know what you don't know and find really great collaborators and allow yourself and your collaborators to make mistakes and know that, you know, theater ultimately, or art, is a process. And we learn by making it and we learn by doing it. And if we can bring that alive for a new generation of artists, right, as young people, I think is one of the most important things we can do as a society. And so you really want to like get them involved, get them making in any way possible, right? Whether that's on their iPhone or on Zoom or in the room, whether they make a video game or they make a film or whatever, how you can bring their excitement to the process of making is really, I think, the way to begin. I don't think that answered your question totally, but
no, but I think it's great because
It's also
we're even seeing some of our largest, you know, regional houses doing these video productions in between. You know, if you look at like the Steppenwolf in Steppenwolf or Goodman, I can't remember which.
Both.
No, I think
They're both-
Steppenwolf is, yeah.
Steppenwolf is doing a lot of video productions that they're sending out to their audiences, not only their subscribers, but in general, to engage their audiences in between. In this day and age of all of this, you know, on-demand streaming, they're getting into the game of creating theater that can be on demand for their audiences as well to keep them engaged. So whether you're a school or a community or a professional theater, you have to think about how you can share your team or your org's talent with your audience and with your patrons to keep them engaged and to get them ready for your next production.
It's also very much a democratization of the process. It's not just engagement, which is important, but who can be in the room. And as Hunter, our producer, loves to talk about, if Grandma Jane can't make it from Nebraska to Pasadena to see Once Upon a Mattress, Grandma Jane, you know, was going to be thrilled to be able to have that option to see it. If people can't afford to, you know, subscribe to the Goodman, here's another option that they can spend much less money and attend a production online, which we love. It's also a great transition, you guys, because you're all talking about engaging the people around you, whether you're at a community theater or at a school. How, April and Andrew, how do you guys go about growing your squads, you know, your team of minions who find this kind of hands-on computer work, tech work delightful, and also diversifying that group? Because traditionally, you know, we often think boys are the ones who gravitate into these programs, but, you know, students who identify as male thinking, oh, I got a hammer, I get a this. And I know that there are plenty of female identifying students who would also love to be in the room, or that is exactly their place. So any hints the two of you can share about how to lure a very diverse group of people into that community?
Well, if there was a secret, I wowould love to know it, but I have had kind of a boom this year of students. You know, on our first semester, we had a small show that we were doing on the Verge, which only has, you know, 5 or maybe 8 people in it. And for whatever reason, every single one of my tech students wanted to crew the show. So we had 15 crew members and, you know, 5 actors. And I was just like scrambling to find, okay, you're in charge of holding the tech table while, no, I can't, but we had, you know, spotlight operators, light board, soundboard, you know, backstage, you know, running crew, that kind of thing. But during the process, I feel like, you know, they kind of do a little bit of everything. They're painting, they're building, they're, you know, making props, they're you know, hanging the lights, they're, you know, hanging speakers. I feel like eventually, you know, one of them finds something in there that they really like. And I try to, if I can, I try to push them in those areas next time. And I'll tell them, you really liked this. I'd like you to stick around and mentor the next person to come in here and do that. And then you have like tiers of people that are kind of specialized. I do like to occasionally take somebody who likes sound and then just like throw them in lights, because I think they should get a little bit of everything. But yeah, I like if somebody's just really likes to build, I would love for them to do that. That's like with the mattress set. It was like, that's just a whole bunch of rectangles. I had some kids that were good at making rectangles, and I was like, okay, I need you guys to teach these 5 people how to make these rectangles, because I need 20 of them in a week. And it's that power of your community. What do you have? And then I feel like maybe we have more people that identify as female this year than we have had in the past. And I don't know what to attribute that to. But I always tell people to recruit as best you can, because I don't know what it is that brings people to technical theater, but I feel like you get a core of 5 or so, and they're really gregarious, and they just kind of like goes into the school, and then they start bringing people in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has a lot to do with community, right? Like that building a strong community where people feel at home in that community, and maybe they see themselves in it right away, or maybe they don't see themselves right away, but somehow there's a moment where it's revealed to them that, like, hey, yeah, you can see yourself here, or you can be here. And I think, what you said, Andrew, like from the student point of view, is like, show them how the magic works, like right away. Like, if we show people how the magic works and then get them to make the magic, right? I really believe that getting students to actually make something right away, right? Maybe it's not like bringing them in first for the entire like rehearsal period of a show, but even in very small ways, small projects, getting them to make something has them invest themselves, and they see their agency grow and their imaginations grow. And that feels really, really powerful. Right. And then they make these connections. And as you said, you've got the 5 kids who make amazing rectangles, teaching another 5 kids how to do it. Right. Then they're collaborating together. They're being generous with one another, and they're learning to work together. And that's also really powerful. But I think that there are like 3 things that are incredibly difficult. And the first one, I'm sure everybody can identify with, from sort of elementary school through professional theater, which is institutional support. Like, in order, I think we need to think about institutional support, we need to think about opportunity, and we need to think about access. And institutional support, and I say this working at a fancy dancy liberal arts college, who basically won't give us any institutional support for football, yes. For art, not so much, right? But we need to be, right, educators and professional artists, when you're in those environments, need to be lobbyists for the institutions, to say, hey, this is highly skilled labor. These are people who know what they're doing, and this is really important to bring this into the school so that we can teach students, that we can model for students, that there is the possibility to have a career in this, right? And that these skills are incredibly transferable to a whole slew of different industries. And the skills are also transferable to their other classes, right? And so I think that's really hard to do, and it's not fun work. And in my experience, mostly people just keep saying no and no and no, but I still think it's our job to do it, and to do it better each time. I think you can say, hey, like, say you live in Chicago, look at the theater community in Chicago. How much are the arts an economic stimulus in the city of Chicago, right? Can't you go to the school and say, like, don't we want to provide a way for our students to think and imagine that they can actually work in this economic environment, right? The arts are important. And then I think there are other ways you can think about doing that. So maybe you can't have a full-time position like you have, Andrew, at your school, but maybe you can reach out to the people in your community in the professional theater or in the community theater who have these skills and invite them into the classroom, right? Or invite them to do a workshop. So you can do anything from a residency to a workshop to one class visits, so that you are showing students that there are people in the world who do this, right? And that the people maybe look like them, and that you can make a living doing this. And it can lead to many, many, many other really fulfilling choices that we make in life and doorways. And then also just access with, what Tina said, is just getting students to see as much theater as possible. And it's hard to do right now during COVID, to go to the theater. It's hard to do maybe in pre-COVID times because nobody wants to pay for the students to go to the theater, but working with your community theaters, working with your professional theaters to make that happen, or working with theater on demand. There are a ton of amazing
Absolutely.
productions out there.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of different platforms here in the US, and I'm more familiar with some abroad in England, just because they have a lot more support for the arts, where you can find amazing content, where you can show your students all the technical design elements through different productions that they watch. Whether it's through Hamilton or Frankenstein or Frozen, and you can actually teach technical theater through, one of my colleagues has a screening series that she does in her beginning stagecraft class, so that what they're talking about, they can then see in practice in these amazing Broadway or national tours,
Absolutely.
So,
and I think that there's a lot of resources out there, like you said, April. We have just a couple minutes left, so I want to make sure we can wrap up and make sure that we can answer any last questions that are out there, Tina, that you wanted to get to.
Well, I just have the rapid fire. So this is like 1 to 2 word answers we're going to throw at you guys. But we had 2 submitted questions, really beautifully written questions. And I am in such awe of the 2 people who sent them in. And they are clearly beginning this process with their students. So what I want is rapid fire. You can get in on it too, Brett. Resources. They're wanting to know, how do I set up lights? How do I color lights? How do I create patterns on stage? What do I need to know about light sets, costumes, props? Quick resources for them, because clearly that's an entire college education that we can't dispel in 55 minutes, but where can they find that info? Brett, you have the first answer because I know it's on the stage.
Yes, so we have a theater resource center within On the Stage. If you go to onthestage.com, we have all sorts of producer resources that are available for you in our resource center, and tools and great tricks. But I would also say, as April mentioned before, use YouTube and look at some of those things. I have done some of the best costumes for professional shows in Chicago by going and thrifting. And it is the quick and the easiest way to get those things done.
Okay, Andrew, what do you got?
I just sent over to Brett. If you're new to lighting, or even if you would just, this video that I just linked to is the most succinct way that I have ever found anyone explain the whole lighting design process. It kind of goes through, like, how do you take a theater and just turn it into a lighting playground? And I think that we follow that link, and I'd be happy to answer questions if you point them to me after the session. I enjoy talking to people about if you're stuck, or if they have a problem, or if you need light.
I just help. Posted your link for everyone to be able to see, and we will include that in our follow-up as well.
April? YouTube.
YouTube. Yes. And then I would say two quick reads. Then this is not for the how do I set up my lights, and how do I make gobos, and how do I get the sound to work. This is the step before, which is you might come across like, oh, I've got this play, but I have no idea what the set should be like. or where it takes place. I mean, you might know where it takes place. Two reads that might be great for your students. One is an essay by a woman named Eleanor Fuchs, and it's called Visit to a Small Planet. And you can find it online if you just Google that. And it is, the subtitle is A Few Questions to Ask a Play. And it's a great little essay, and it illuminates for your students all the different types of questions that you can ask a play. How does the language work? How does the world work, right? When you're creating this very small planet. And then a second read, maybe for theater teachers, but also for your students, anyone interested in acting, theater directing, design, slightly more philosophical, but super, super concise, is a book by the amazing theater director Anne Bogart, who's an American theater director, and she's written many, many things. But she wrote a book in 2007 called "And Then You Act." And I think it is a great read for high school students, college students, theater professionals, and it really asks you to think about how you make theater, why you make theater, and what are some of the most necessary things that you need to tell a story. So those are the two things that I would say that are just a little bit more sort of in the beginning world, outside of the like, how do I actually make things work?
Fantastic.
Brett, you're gonna send us off?
Yes, thank you everyone for joining our webinar today. We will be making this available on our resource center on the stage. This recording will be available with all the other videos that we have. We have a great history and library of videos for you to review and to see information. We will have another interesting webinar topic coming up in April, which we will be launching information about in the next week. Thank you all for joining. We appreciate the questions and the ongoing interest in the organization. If there are any questions that you can possibly think of, you can reach out to me at Brett@OnTheStage, and I will be happy to get those to either of our presenters today or get you resources from On the Stage that might be able to help you take the next step. Thank you to our presenters today, and we appreciate everyone joining. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
April and Andrew.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.